Hi, good to see you again. Today I'd like to talk a little bit about survivors. I've done a lot of thinking on this subject, mainly after reading an article about one of the last survivors to escape from the South Tower during 9/11. He briefly speaks about his experience in very short terms, but looks mostly on his life since then and how he's become very involved with volunteer work and charity work. Well, in addition to the 9/11 survivor, it took me into other readings about survivors of the tsunami, about the Holocaust, even Hiroshima back in World War II, survivors of the atomic blast in Japan, cancer survivors. I spoke with a woman who is involved with a nonprofit for the surviving families of murder victims and how the ripple effect extends out well beyond the families. And I was looking for a common denominator in all these experiences. What do all these survivors of different calamities, different catastrophes have in common? And how are we able to benefit from their stories? Well, as you can imagine, the stories are very diverse. In the instance of the fellow who survived the tsunami, he talked categorically about all the things that he experienced and feared during his experience. For example, the darkness. With all the power out, you're not able to see anything. And at night, all you hear is the water. The world is black outside, there's no street lights, there's no power. And your imagination runs wild with thinking about what's in the water, all the germs. He talked about the oil slicks on top of the water from vehicles and businesses. Of course, he talked about all the people that had made their transition and their bodies floating around. All the sharp objects that were cutting people while they were in the water. And then afterwards, after the daylight came and the fear of multiple waves following them and the rumors of them had passed, it turned to survival. What to do for food and water. This put the people that owned the stores in a precarious position. They had everything that was needed. What were they to do? Were they to give these things away and help their fellow citizens that were surviving this? Or were they to sell them? It puts a whole different slant on our world. He mentioned something as simple as losing his cell phone. Well, many of us program all of our numbers in there on speed dial, and we forget numbers. So when a telephone was available, he couldn't remember any of the numbers to call for help. It really puts life in a different perspective when things change overnight. In the case of the survivors of Hiroshima, they talked about the devastation, trying to find families, much like these other instances. What do you do? Survivors of plane crash. I read about the Hudson River crash and how orderly the people seemed to move from the wreckage of the plane. And in fact, in most cases, there was very little panic because people seemed to shift into this primal mode within them and do what seems sensical, what seems orderly and right. All of this reading made me think about one of the scriptures, and it's from Psalms 3:55, and it is, "Trust in the Lord with all thy heart, and lean not unto your own understanding." You see, in each of these instances, all of these survivors that I've mentioned, they had one thing in common. They persevered through their plight, and only in retrospect, after having survived it, began to learn from it and garner wisdom. And the one denominator that I found among all of them is that they were saved to bring forth their stories, to teach us a lesson. Most of them experienced what they call survivor guilt. Why me? Why did I survive? Why was I the last one out of the South Tower? And they felt guilty about maybe not doing more to help others in their plight. But they're serving now in a way very differently than they did before the experience, by sharing their story, by helping others, by forming foundations and shelters and encounter groups and blogs in every way they can to spread their word. One of my ministers many years ago was involved in a plane crash where her spouse died. And through her recovery, she had an afterlife experience where she was told to go forth and teach love. So all these people come away from these experiences changed. You don't have to suffer a catastrophe in your life to change the way you think, to change the perspective on the world around you, to ask yourself, what can I do to be of service? What stories can I share of my experience, even if it's something very mundane, to help others? I invite you to take a look at your life and the experiences you've had and ask yourself these questions. In Job 22:21, it says, "Acquaint now thyself with him, and be at peace. Thereby good shall come unto thee." Just as it has to all these people that are survivors. We're all survivors of life, whether it's tumultuous relationships, economic hardships, recovery from substance abuse, recovery from homelessness. We all have stories we can share. Let's get on the stick and start sharing them. God bless you all, and see you soon.